Why hello there, and welcome back to Tabletop Ferox, or TF for short. And in this episode, I thought I would change things up a bit. 2 Chained was released in 2022, and is a game that I have been meaning to cover for a long time, but just haven't gotten around to it because it's kinda weird. And I don't mean weird in the sense that it's a TF game, I mean weird in its overall structure and transformative approach to how a role-playing game functions, which does make it a little tricky to cover. It is a game that is simultaneously very universal and very specific, in that it is a game intended to be played in any setting, any genre, any kind of story you want to tell, as long as that story focuses specifically on transformation of the characters. So yes, it can be a game about being turned into a horse, but it can also be a game about being taken over by an alien parasite, demon possession, bimbofication, or cybernetic augmentation. Just any type of story focused around the idea of the characters being in some way changed. And that is a really interesting idea, focusing your game mechanically and thematically around one specific narrative element that can be applied to pretty much any type of story. So a +1 for concept. I really like seeing games that are trying something different and filling a niche that hasn't already been filled, instead of just being the 1000th game in an already oversaturated corner of the market. And as this is such a unique thing, I may have to change up the way that I review things a little bit, so let's just get into it and see where it leads us. As usual, we will begin by making a character, and as this is a tarot-based game, we will need a deck of tarot cards. A thing that I surprisingly have never actually felt the need to acquire. But fortunately, the designer of this game was nice enough to send me the tarot deck made specifically for this game. And if you're thinking that this is a little small for a tarot deck, yes, it is just the 22 cards of the major arcana, which are the only ones that are used in the game. And since this is the tarot deck for the transformation game, each card features unique transformation artwork, which is all very well done in addition to being, thematically appropriate for the game. My favorite is the Empress, which will be kind of obvious later. And to create a character, we need to draw 3 cards. A face card, which represents the character's core values and provides a special ability, and the Lovers. You are amorous, open-hearted to charm and beauty. Warmth and life are your gifts of abundance, naturally feeding others' soul with light. Though you may act carelessly at times, you care for your partners more than the world. And that gives us the ability to succeed on any attribute when we draw the Lovers card, a thing that will make sense later when I explain the mechanics. And also, your success draws infatuation towards you, feeding the flame of love. Then a Rising card, which provides a positive character trait, and the Star. Performance is your keystone, pleasing a crowd your expertise. Pressure is the fuel to your fire, and every spectator is about to witness the extraordinary. And finally, a Falling card, which is a negative quality, and we have Judgment. Deception will be your downfall. Falsehood always catches you off guard. Hide your trustful tendencies, or you'll be easily captured in a maze of deceit. And, that's basically it. Like, you define the other aspects of your character, name, personality, what kind of shoes they wear, etc., as you would for any other game, but in terms of mechanical character generation, this is it. And this is a game based on character transformation, so putting less emphasis on mechanical character generation does make sense, as the whole point is that the character is going to change. So I am not going to give a score for character creation just because of the simplicity, but also this is a game that focuses not so much on how characters interact with the world, as much as it does how the world interacts with the characters. As I said, it is a little odd. Of course, so that doesn't necessarily mean that we are done talking about the characters, just that as we discuss the characters, it's going to bleed directly into the mechanics. Characters have 4 attributes: physical aptitude, which is basically physical power; mental aptitude, which is intelligence and awareness; physical fortitude, which is, your standard fortitude; and mental fortitude, which is for resisting mental stress, but also covers some traditionally charisma-based things like deception. And then we have the Change Cross, each arm of which is tied to one of the attributes and has 3, let's just say, steps, each of which can take 3 points of damage and 3 points of change. And this is where it starts to get a little complicated. As mentioned, each arm of the Change Cross can take 3 changes to the associated attribute. So, for example, if you were turning into a dragon, physical aptitude changes could be growing scales, claws, fangs, and wings. Physical fortitude changes could be breathing fire, lengthening into a more serpentine form, and growing larger. Mental aptitude changes could give you enhanced draconic senses and a magical awareness of treasure. And mental fortitude might force you to become overly concerned about hoarding and protecting wealth, like dragons do. Then every time one of your attributes takes a change, you undergo the specific listed changes indicated on the cross. And then if you take a 4th change in any attribute, all of the changes become permanent. And the Change Cross is specific to the story, not the character. Although I guess you could have an individual Change Cross per character, but that would be a lot of extra work. And hopefully you are still following, because now it's time for the mechanics. So let's say that our character is at the mall and has made the unfortunate decision to pocket a decorative dragon coin from one of those weird stores that sell fantasy statues and decorative swords and such that they used to have in every mall for some reason, but has now gotten lost in the winding corridors running behind the stores while trying to make their escape. Finding a way out would be a test of mental aptitude, so we draw a number of cards equal to our undamaged points of mental aptitude, which is 3. And we have the Star, Justice, and the Fool. However, since the Star is our rising card, we also get to draw 1 additional card, and Wheel of Fortune. If we had drawn our falling card, we would instead have shuffled the first card back into the deck. And the outcome is specified individually by card, so the Star is success on mental aptitude, Justice is success in the attribute with the most changes amongst all players, the Fool is success but always in the worst way, and Wheel of Fortune is success in physical aptitude. Then we must select one of the cards to use from our turn, which is discarded, and the rest shuffled back into the deck. And since this is a mental aptitude test, you might be thinking that the obvious choice is the Star, which is success on mental aptitude. But remember, that is also our rising card, and if we use it now, it will be discarded from the deck until such time as the used cards are shuffled back in. So it is to our advantage to keep that card in the deck as long as possible, since every time it comes up, we get an extra card. And on this particular draw, we can also succeed on Justice because all attributes are tied at 0 for most changes, or the Fool, which is always a success, just in the worst possible way. And I think I'm going to go with Justice. because what attribute that gives success on in the future is going to be unpredictable, and the Fool is probably actually going to be a better card to have in case of an emergency. So we succeed on the test, making our way through the labyrinthine corridors, discarding the Justice card, and shuffling the others back into the deck. So let's say that while we have found the exit door, it seems to be stuck, and starting to panic a little bit, we decide that we're just going to try and brute force it open. That would be a test of physical aptitude, so once again we draw 3 cards, and the Empress, which is success on mental aptitude, the Hermit, and the High Priestess, both of which are success on mental fortitude. And let's turn that upside down so that the discard pile is more obvious. So no cards that succeed on physical aptitude. However, we do still need to choose one to be discarded from the deck, and let's go with Hermit and hope that there is not a rush on mental fortitude checks later. So we take a few steps back, run at the door, which magically opens itself, causing us to tumble through and fall down hard, taking 1 damage to physical aptitude as our shoulder slams onto the hard ground. And then realize in horror and confusion that the exit door that was supposed to lead into the parking lot has somehow led us back into the mall. Because as I did an entire video on, failed checks should never lead to dead ends. But now let's move ahead and say that it's much later in the game, we've taken some changes and some damage, and now find ourselves needing to jump across the magical chasm that's been opened in the food court by the owner of the store we shoplifted from, who was secretly a wizard. And that would be another test of physical aptitude. However, since we took 1 point of damage to our physical aptitude, we only draw 2 cards. And we have the Hierophant, which is success on physical fortitude, and the Magician, which is success on mental aptitude. Neither of which are physical aptitude. So once again, a failure. However, we do have one more option. We can choose to succumb, which is a success on the test at the cost of taking a change to the associated attribute. And since it seems like a very important test we are doing, let's do that. So we jump across the chasm, and as we are sailing and it seems like we're about to fall, a pair of membranous wings sprout from our back, carrying us across to the other side, where we can confront the wizard. Because let's be honest here, every good adventure ends with a confrontation with a wizard. Doesn't matter the genre, doesn't matter the game, there should always be a confrontation with a wizard. And that is it for the mechanics, and as I said earlier, it is a bit weird in both what it does and how it does it. And as I've said, well, pretty much every single time I've covered a game that uses cards, what I really want to see in such a game is that they are utilizing the unique properties of cards that dice do not possess. And 2 Change does a really good job of utilizing the unique properties of cards, not just in drawing and choosing your cards, but also the strategy of considering the changing makeup of the deck as the game goes on. To the point where choosing to fail on a test can be a valid strategy if it means keeping or removing specific cards. However, the mechanics, while simple, can also be a little non-intuitive, which isn't to say that they are bad, just that unless you memorize the functions of 22 different cards, you are going to be having to look up those card results for every single draw. The change cross may also seem a little overly complicated at first, but that is very much one of those things where it has to be that way to do the thing that it does. having the transformation broken up into those 12 specific changes that can be taken in different orders means that the different characters are going to experience that same transformation in different ways and have a more individual experience. And also keep in mind that while looking at the change cross it seems complicated having all that information at once, from the player's perspective, they only need to know about the transformations that they have personally experienced or witnessed. So they never have to take in all of that information at once. And that brings me to the big thing about this game, and that is, it is a very roleplay heavy game. There is not much in terms of mechanics that enforces the effects of the transformations, because the effects of the transformations can be anything from growing claws to losing binocular vision. So it is mostly going to be enforced by the game master and player, because experiencing the transformations is the core concept of the game, and you really have to be willing to submit yourself to it. Although there are some additional mechanics for the transformations, a couple of the provided stories have some mechanics on the change crosses themselves, and all of them have additional story moves which provide additional mechanics for that specific story. And then of course if you are making your own story with your own change crosses, you can incorporate whatever additional mechanics you would like to have. And that brings me to the other big thing about this game. It is fairly rules light. Like, there are no specific rules for damage, just if you fail a test, the result of which would be taking damage, you do. Similarly, while there are specific mechanics for taking changes, like succumbing and the results of certain cards, they are also a thing that can be inflicted at the game master's discretion. But also, for a game more targeted at one-shots, the process of making those stories is very involved. As I said earlier, at its heart, this is a universal role-playing system that just happens to be focused on transformation. So it provides you that framework for the transformation mechanics, but there are a lot of blanks there that you need to fill in. Like the change crosses, story moves if desired, and, of course, the story. So unless you are running a pre-made scenario, there is a lot of prep work that has to go into even a simple story. But that does mean that it also provides a lot of freedom. Like, I went with an incredibly obvious interpretation of transformation in the mechanics example, but you could also apply the exact same mechanics to something significantly more subtle, like the experience of turning into a zombie, like in Return of the Living Dead, or iZombie. Let's not do a game based on iZombie though. So a 4 out of 6 for mechanics. It is a game that does a very specific thing, and does it very well in a way that can be applied to a very wide range of stories. It has some issues, but for the most part, those are things that are required to make the game work the way it works. However, as a game focused on doing one specific thing, it is very much focused on doing that one specific thing. So it has the transformation mechanics and some basic mechanics which are tied into the transformation mechanics, but not much else. And also, it does require a lot of prep work to make an adventure. The rules are written okay, some things could have been explained a bit better, especially for the amount of unique elements that are in this game. Honestly, I had to watch an actual play before I was really confident in my understanding of the rules and game flow, but overall, it's okay. One important touch I do like though is the way that safety tools are handled, in that as a transformation game, they do take special attention to address safety rules relating to transformation, because compromising the integrity of the body is a thing that a lot of people are uncomfortable with. That is literally why body horror is a genre. They also go through the extra step of creating a tiered system for mental transformations, because Once again, losing control of one's mind, senses, and even identity is a thing that a lot of people are going to be uncomfortable with. And that is a thing that they very much did not have to do. They could have just gone into this saying, it's a transformation game. Obviously, you're okay with any kind of transformation if you're getting into it. And I very much appreciate that it was done. So that is very nice, but still no adjustment for writing. In addition to the core rules, there is a selection of story moves for you to use in your own stories, an additional set of specific transgender change rules, 11 pre-written scenarios, which are a very nice thing to have, both as something to run and also something to look at to get an idea of how a game is supposed to work and how it's supposed to be structured and such. Because, as previously mentioned, there is a lot of prep work involved in making a story, so it's nice to have a lot of examples of what they are supposed to be like. And notably, each of the stories is categorized by those mental transformation tiers, which is going to make it much easier to find a story that is appropriate for your players. And a thing that I always like to see, an entire set of solo play rules, which I don't really have time to go over in this video, but maybe I'll cover them later. Or maybe I'll cover a different game that is based on those solo play rules. So overall, an amount of additional content that accounts for around 3/4 of the book's 200+ page count, all of which is greatly appreciated, especially for such an unusual game. So a pretty big +1 for content. And finally, the layout is meh, honestly, although there is a lot of very nice art in the book. You have all the images from the tarot cards so that you can enjoy those even if you don't have the physical cards, as well as a lot of other full-page illustrations, all of which are very nice. However, your enjoyment of the art is going to depend heavily on your attitude towards TF art, because that's what it is, because this is a TF game, so it has TF art in it. So, 4 out of 6 for presentation. Like I said, a lot of nice art, provided you're not weird about it. And that's it for To Change, a game that does a very specific thing and does it very well, but you have to want the very specific experience that it provides. Like, a lot of games are very goal-oriented, but this one is very experience-oriented, which more than other games means that playing to win is kind of defeating the point of the game. It is a game where you need to be willing to let negative things happen to your character, or even push your character towards those things, and then also be willing to handicap yourself in keeping with the results. If your goal going into this game is avoiding transformation, you are just going to be fighting against the experience that it was designed to provide. It is also a game with a very specific target audience, but one that I think has appeal beyond that audience, as long as you are willing to embrace it for what it is, just a different tabletop gaming experience. Like, yeah, it can be a little weird playing a game where your character is turning into a horse, but it was probably a little weird the first time you pretended to be an elf, too. And if this is the sort of thing you're interested in, or if this review has changed your mind on the subject, I swear that's the last change pun, but would like something with a bit more structure and less prep work, you might be interested in the designer's upcoming game, The Island of Dr. Moreau. An epic capsule game? I think that's the terminology for a game that has a cast of characters and provides an encapsulated experience. I'm not up on all the terminology, but I think that's it. Which promises romance, drama, and over 30 different transformation sequences, plus a bunch of other stuff. It is looking like a very well put together game with a lot of content for being inspired by not The Island of Dr. Moreau, but a 2000s Gaia Online forum roleplay group inspired by the island of Dr. Moreau. Yeah, if you want to get my attention, a good way to do that is tell me that your game can trace its origins back to a 2000s web forum with dressable anime avatars. So if that sounds like the kind of thing you might be interested in, which I assume there's a high probability of considering that you are watching this video, the Kickstarter launches in early May, and there are links to all of the things in the description. And thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Broken Unicorn, Omar Parker, Randy Mulholland, and Toshirokuro. If you'd like to be cool like them, you can check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons. You can transform into a subscriber. I lied, that was not the last transformation pun. That was the last transformation pun. You can also hit the like button and all the other videos that are floating around screen, which I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.